Can't wait.
We're excited. We're excited about Jamal. The plan is for Jamal to be a Jet for life.
That was Joe Douglas at the Scouting Combine in February. Now it's July. Jamal Adams is a Seattle Seahawk. Welcome to an emergency edition of Can't Wait, our Jets podcast here at The Athletic. Tim McMaster here with Connor Hughes, who broke the news earlier today. Adams traded. We'll get into the return. We'll get into what went wrong overall with Adams as a New York Jets and all of that. Does this make the Jets better off going down the road long term? But I guess, first of all, we'll start here, Connor. The Daily News story came out on Friday. About 24 hours later, Adams is out of town. How did this happen so quickly after things went so bad?
Yeah, so the story from the Daily News, which was, unprecedented. I actually was talking to my editor, Chris Strauss, about this. I put it in our NFL Slack channel because I was trying to rack my brain around it. If I could ever recall a time where a player went on the record to rip into a coach and a general manager like Jamal Adams did while still playing for that coach. And a lot of people that I talked to all had it, because I've heard of like the out coach, like when players have said like, oh, we were out coached and then we were outplayed, and when a coach gets fired, guys will dig in and rip them. But what I couldn't remember or couldn't recall at all was a guy who was currently employed by a guy ripping his current head coach like this, it like basically days before training camp starts, and quite literally saying, I don't think he's the right guy to get us to the promised land. I've never heard of it, and everyone that I talked to had never heard of it. You have guys like Darius Slay who just did it to Patricia, but it was after he was traded. There was stuff with Kevin Barlow and Mike Nolan, but that was after he was traded. There was obviously Miami Dolphin players who ripped Adam Gase, but that was after Gase was gone. So this was like completely unprecedented and totally out of the blue, and it surprised not only people within the Jets organization, but it surprised everyone that I talked to around the league because no one saw this coming. It's one thing to request a trade. It's one thing to take veiled shots like Jamal's been doing on Instagram. It's one thing to anonymously rip a player. That's what happened with Tiki Barber and Michael Strahan years ago when they took it and when they ripped into Tom Coughlin anonymously. It's one thing to do with that, but to put your name to it and go on the record like Jamal did with the Daily News was and is completely out of the blue, completely unprecedented and new. So that certainly, I don't know if it was necessarily the straw. It was probably the straw that broke the camel's back. But these discussions between the Jets and the Seahawks, what I can tell you from talking to multiple sources, is that the Jets and Seahawks have been discussing a trade regarding Jamal Adams for quite some time. When I made a call to someone over in someone tied pretty closely to this trade, what I was told is, Connor, this doesn't happen in a day. This is not something that okay, Jamal talked and this story ran in the Daily News on Friday. Jamal Adams is traded on Saturday. This does not happen in one day. It's not like, oh, okay, let's now move him and boom, 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 here are all the pieces, it's all done. No, this is something that's been talked about for weeks. It's something that's been talked about for months. This is where they've been going back and forth. The reason why the trade happened now, and the one major piece, not the story and what Jamal Adams said in the Daily News, that's not what got this to the finish line and done. The main piece of this equation that was the waiting game and what needed to be finalized was the negotiations between the NFL and the NFLPA to have some kind of resolution on what the future salary cap is going to look like for the Seahawks, not the Jets, for the Seahawks. What the Seahawks needed to know was that because it very much looks like the NFL is going to play games this year with no fans in the stands, or at best case scenario, minimal fans in the stands, there was a chance that the league was going to lose like $3.2 billion in revenue. If that happened, the salary cap had the potential to drop $70 million in 2021 next year, that it was going to take what the salary cap is right now, drop it $70 million. If that was to happen, there were going to be 3 teams that were sitting over the salary cap. And with those 3 teams that were over the salary cap, they were going to be over by like $5 and $10 million. So the Seahawks were one of those teams that if the salary cap dropped $70 million, they were going to be screwed. They were not going to have money. They were going to have to finagle people's contracts and cut people. So they were not going to be in the position to add somebody like Jamal Adams, even if they didn't give him a new contract extension, they were not going to be able to bring him on for what he was going to be paid in 2020. They couldn't do the trade. When the NFL and NFLPA came to this agreement where they were able to say, okay, in a worst case scenario, the 2021 salary cap will be $175 million. That's what got this trade to the finish line. That's what made it so that if this worst case scenario happens and the team's salary cap in 2021 is $175 million, the Seahawks will still have $27 million in salary cap space. They can free another $11 million by cutting Dwayne Brown. They can free another like $6 million if they cut Quandre Diggs. So they can add even more salary cap space. They now have the flexibility. That's what opened the door to get Jamal Adams done. It probably enticed the Jets to do it right now, as opposed to waiting a little longer to see if there was, whatever to do, or if they could reconcile this relationship. This story enticed the Jets to get the deal done now. But the main thing that needed to happen for this deal to get done is the understanding of what the 2021 salary cap is going to be. Once that came down, that's when this thing got done. The Seahawks had it. I mean, look, what the Jets got back for this guy is a bounty. And so the fact that they were able to get this kind of an offer for Jamal Adams, it's what made Joe Douglas change his tune. It's what made Joe Douglas change his tune.
Yeah, and let's get right into what they are getting back exactly, and it's interesting because you go back to the trade deadline and there was talk like, oh, if the Jets could get 2 first rounders, they would have probably moved him way back then. And that
talking about 1 and 2 twos, one and two twos, and they would have moved him last year.
So this is what they get. They get a 2021 first rounder, a 2021 third rounder, and then a 2022 first rounder, but then they send their 4th rounder. So that's kind of a trade, 4th for a first, but still obviously a significant move up from the Jets 4th round pick to the Seahawks 1st round pick next year in 2022. And then Bradley McDougald, who it's not just a throwaway player, right? This is a safety
starter
that fills in directly the role. So you're losing a safety and you're immediately replacing him with a starting safety in Bradley McDougald. So it's a great haul. I think it's more than the Jets could have hoped for in a situation where they weren't suddenly put in this situation where everyone in the NFL knows that they want to trade Adams and Adams wants to get dealt. Usually the moment that big story breaks and everybody knows how disgruntled the guy is, immediately what you're going to get back is going to be less discounted, at least in some way. And the Jets now get more than I think anybody ever thought they would. And plus the player too. So beyond the picks, who knows what those will be. For this to be a successful trade for the Jets, they have to draft wisely with those picks. So only time will tell over the next couple of years if they do that. But they immediately get McDougald back. So talk about what he is as a player.
Well, real quick, just to kind of go back to what you were saying about this return. And it goes to what Joe said at the Combine about making Jamal Adams a Jet for life. He wasn't lying. I mean, he wasn't trying to just say a good, sing a good tune and give us media members headlines. That wasn't the goal. The Jets throughout this entire time, even from the moment that Jamal requested a trade, they had no intention of trading Jamal Adams. That's not a lie. That's not a team spin. That's really what it was. They had the resources planned out to pay Jamal Adams. They intended to pay Jamal Adams. They wanted to make Jamal Adams, like Joe said, a Jet for life. What changed, and we've talked about this before, was that, or the big kind of bickering match between Jamal Adams and the Jets is that Jamal wanted his new contract right now, and the Jets were not willing to give him that contract right now because of the primary reason was because they have him under contract for both this season and next season. And then also the uncertainty of the future salary cap because of the COVID-19 pandemic and where they don't know what things are going to look like. They don't want to give him all this money. The only thing that would have changed this trade and basically convinced the Jets to trade Jamal Adams is exactly what Joe Douglas said at the deadline last year. They needed to be blown away by an offer if they wanted to trade Jamal Adams. If they, after this Daily News story, were only getting second round pick offers for Jamal, if they were only getting say McDougald and then a third round pick, or they were only getting kind of your starter and a 4 conditional, they were not going to trade Jamal Adams. The Jets were perfectly content going into training camp with Jamal Adams on the team. They were perfectly content making Jamal Adams play out his rookie contract and not moving him. Even after this story where he ripped Gase and he ripped Douglas, they were still not going to trade Jamal Adams for pennies on the dollar just because Jamal Adams wants to be traded and they wanted to get rid of them. They wanted to get rid of a headache. They realized the impact that Adams has on the field. They realized that right now, even after getting back McDougal, all this stuff, they're not a better team today at this moment than they were 12 hours ago. They were a better team with Jamal Adams. They realized all that. So if they were going to trade their best football player, they needed to be blown away. And the fact that last year at the deadline, they would have taken a 1 and 2 twos, and they managed after all of this, after all of the crap that Jamal Adams has done in terms of the headaches that he's caused and begging for a trade and saying he's going to want to trade, the fact that in the face of all of that, they were able to get 2 first-round picks, a 3rd-round pick, flip a 4th-round pick, and then also get back a starting player, because that's what McDougal is. He is a starting caliber player. I talked to somebody that evaluated him and said he's a very good player, can play both safety positions, has some coverage ability, but is better near the line of scrimmage, and he is a very, very underrated player. They got that back in addition to all the draft picks. I mean, this was a deal that quite literally, Tim, they could not turn down. The Jets could not say no to this trade. They could not say no to this trade at the deadline last year if it was offered, and they didn't intend, like Jamal Adams was all this happy camper until he heard his name floated around as a potential trade partner, right? Like that's when now I want to trade, blah, 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 blah. The Jets weren't going to turn this deal down if they got it at the deadline last year. I mean, this is a quarterback ransom that they got for a safety. I mean, it's crazy. Like they can't say no to this. They could never have said no to this.
So I get that they would have held on to him if they hadn't gotten this great offer, and that's fair. But the fact is that if he shows up at training camp a few days after the story and all those quotes that he threw out there, there's absolutely a chance that suddenly this starts to spread, right? It starts as Jamal Adams isn't happy, but then he's in a locker room, socially distanced, in a locker room with a bunch of teammates, and he's talking. There's no doubt that this guy is going to be talking about how this team did me wrong in the offseason, and I'm not happy about this. And I'm sure he would still bring it in 2020 for the New York Jets on the field, because that's the kind of player he is. But who knows the effect that this would have had in that locker room for this team. So the fact that they were able to get this done a couple of days before everyone arrives at training camp, I mean, I think for 2020, yes, you're not going to have Jamal Adams. That's going to have a huge impact on this team on the field. But in the locker room, this is probably a much better scenario as far as keeping this team glued together through a 2020 season that, admittedly, without Jamal Adams, probably looks a little bleaker for the Jets as a team.
Yeah, I agree with you, mate. I actually touched base with a handful of players about that. Like if it was going to cause this, like if seeing Jamal go out on going out against the coach and the GM, if that's going to impact their feelings on the team. And the vast majority of the guys that I talked to all said the exact same thing. And that's what you kind of expect to hear from these guys. And it's a guy trying to get paid. And there's an unwritten rule in the NFL that when a guy is trying to get a new contract, you don't interfere with that. A dude trying to get his money, you don't interfere with, and you kind of just understand it. Like whatever battle tactics like guys use to try to get paid, you just let him go. And that's why a couple years ago when LeVeon Bell was holding out of the Steelers, it was such a massive headline when a lot of the Pittsburgh offensive linemen started speaking out against Le'Veon's got to get back here. He's hurting the team. He's got to get back, because you had to realize Bell was doing him to get his money and he's trying to get paid. And in the NFL, you're one hit away from never playing again. So when a guy wants to get paid and a guy wants his money, you have to let him do his thing and do what's right for him to take care of his family, to take care of himself, to get his paycheck and get his money. So you never interfere with that. So a lot of these guys, I think a lot of the guys I talked to all took that stance of, no, it's just him trying to get his money. No, it's just him trying to get paid. It's totally understandable. It's a contract. We're not it's fine. It's no big deal. Where I'm in line with you, though, and I think about it is that, and I think the Jets came to this realization, is that we've said about, I mean, Marissa has titled every single one of these podcasts. I'm sure that she's run out of like Jamal Adams
entire
part
offseason.
7. Yeah, it's been Jamal Adams
Synonyms
saga
for
part
unhappy.
13. Oh, we've got more like episodes than freaking Star Wars right now with all this Jamal Adams
Twilight.
crap. I mean, like Revenge of the Sith is coming up, right? Like Revenge of the Safety. So it's like, I mean, we're coming up with like all these different things. We're talking about Jamal. We're talking about Jamal. Talking about Jamal. What we've continually said, Tim, is that there's only one play for him because he's under contract the next 2 years. The Jets control him. The only thing that he can do is request a trade, is say he wants to be traded, and kind of try to become enough a pain in the ass that Joe Douglas says, all right, ship him out. The one thing that when we were discussing this, that I never in a million years thought was a possibility was what he did in the Daily News on Friday. When he opened up and said that he does not believe, and you look, Jet fans, a lot of Jet fans do not like Adam Gase. A lot of Jet fans don't believe he's the right man for the job. That's fine. But the fact that a player, your best player, came out against your current head coach and said, I don't think he's the right guy to give me to the promised land or get us to the promised land. When that quote is said on the record, attributed, that's when suddenly Jamal has entirely realized that the only weapon that he had in this fight was his voice. And he was willing to use it in ways that were completely unprecedented and nobody really has ever done before. I mean, look at Yannick Njoku up in Jacksonville, right? Like that dude's trying to been getting out of there for like 2 years. He's done with Jacksonville. He hasn't even gone to the extent that Jamal was willing to go to. And I think what suddenly had to have been a thought in Gase's mind, in Douglas's mind, in Christopher Johnson's mind, in everyone's mind over there in Florham Park is that if Jamal's willing to go to this extent now and publicly say with his name tied to it that Adam Gase isn't the right guy to get to the job, he's going to get that desperate to get traded. What happens if this season begins whenever the hell it begins and the Jets start 1-3? Is he going to be calling up the Daily News again and giving the complete game plan of what Adam Gase did compared to what he should have done? If attacking the owner, which is what he did, if attacking which again, the Woody Johnson stuff is completely, it's reports that have surfaced. Woody Johnson has denied it, all that stuff. I mean, look, if what is said in that CNN report is true, that's a whole other case. And there are going to be more than just Jamal Adams speaking out against him. So that's not denying that. But if he spoke out against the owner, right? And after that report came out, he spoke out against the general manager, both anonymously, and he spoke out against the general manager through these veiled Instagram comments. Did the same thing against the coach when he kind of told Antonio Cromartie about it, and then Cromartie let it out. Then he obviously leaked some reports anonymously as well. But now if he's willing to go publicly on that, publicly rip the coach, publicly rip the general manager, speak out against the owner, also do it all anonymously, and then that doesn't work, what is he not willing to do, right? So now is he suddenly so desperate to get traded from this team? Is he going to start, say the offense struggles? Is he going to start taking aim at players? Was he willing to now start talking out against Sam Darnold? Was he going to start talking out against LeVeon Bell? Was he going to start talking out against Chris Herndon? Was he going to take shots at the offensive line if the offensive line doesn't come together like hoped? Was he going to take shots at fellow defenders? Was he going to take shots at Greg Williams? Now, I mean, who wasn't? You know, if he's willing to literally go after the head coach publicly with his name tied to it, who is not in his target line? And what is he not willing to do? I don't think at that point there was anything Jamal Adams was willing to do to not try to expedite his trade out of the Jets unless the Jets started winning. So you were basically going to be put in a situation here with the Jets when the regular season starts that if they don't win and they don't start winning, this could be a ticking time bomb just ready to explode, because Jamal Adams was literally willing to use his voice in a way that I never thought was possible. I don't think you ever thought was possible. I don't think I know this from talking to people around the league. People around the league never thought was possible. This was unprecedented. And I think that while players said they wouldn't care and it didn't create a distraction, I'm with you, Tim. If they let this one continue and go on, it was going to be a distraction.
Yeah, he set a new standard for what you can do to get out of town.
Oh, yes, he did, man. Oh, yes, he did.
So there's some remnants of this, though, because he's gone, sure, but that article's still out there. Douglas has made this trade and got a great return, but a lot of negative things were put out there about Douglas. And granted, he's still somewhat new to this position, and Gase obviously has been just scorched. So the Jets have to bounce back from that. Now, Gase can do it by winning football games. That's the easy way for the head coach. Go out there, win football games, and you win people over. That's not going to be easy with this team schedule and not having Jamal Adams now, but that's what you have to do. As far as Douglas goes, do you think that he handled this situation poorly until this trade, or is it just a matter of inexperience and some sensitivity by Adams? I mean, it could, you know what I mean? Like, yes, it wasn't perfectly handled by the team, but also there's probably two sides to this as far as why it went so badly.
So I'll put it this way. If Joe had, and I kind of wrote this yesterday, that Joe Douglas had tried the do nothing approach, that it was, and he probably assumed, like all of us did, Jamal didn't have any play. Like he didn't have any cards really to play. And then, I mean, he really just pulled the Joker out and it was like, haha, look what I can do. And it was wild. But like literally, man, I still like reading that story. I've read the story 100 times. I still can't believe he said what he said on the record with his name tied to it. But this was kind of like the point of my column that I wrote yesterday, which was that Joe can't let this thing, he can't do the do nothing approach anymore. He had to do something. He could not let this fester any longer for the reasons that we just discussed, which was, if Jamal's willing to say what he said in the Daily News on Friday, you cannot go into the season with that being considered okay, because you have no idea what he will say now. And he, one player that's willing to talk out like that on the record without a care in the world, clearly you've got a potential massive issue on your hands there. Joe would have, in my opinion, handled this poorly and deserved criticism if the Jets got a first round pick and a player for Jamal Adams, or if the Jets got a 1 and a 4 for Jamal Adams, or if the Jets got a second and a starting player for Jamal Adams right now. I would have been writing a column that if you guys are, go on theathletic.com, because my editors, our columns up on this whole thing, and there's a big section in there about Douglas, giving him a ton of praise. So if he had done that, what I had just said, like I've gotten a first and something, he would have deserved criticism, because in my opinion, as a general manager of this football team and as a guy who's being paid a ton of money to do this, he needs to be able to have the foresight to know the player, know the situation, and have an idea that this kind of explosion like Jamal had was possible. And if he was just going to get a 1 and a 4, he was just going to get a 1 and a starter, he should have had the foresight to trade Jamal Adams before the draft so that he could have, say he traded him to the Cowboys, he could have come out of this coming draft with Mekhi Becton, where he did, CeeDee Lamb with the Cowboys pick, and then one more starting caliber player. But what Joe Douglas got from the Seahawks, that changes the landscape, man, because he came away with more than I ever thought was possible for, forget Jamal Adams, I mean, any other player. Like, if the Jets had Khalil Mack and traded him for this haul, I would have said, like, good trade. Like this, what they got, man, is ridiculous. You're talking about, again, 2 first-round picks, a third-round pick, and a good starting player. Like, again, like I said, the kid they got back, he's not a schlub. Like, he's a good starting player. So the fact that they were able to get back 2 first-round picks, which I didn't think was possible before the draft, I didn't think was possible at the deadline last year, and a third-round pick, and the starting player, no, there's no criticism. And if anyone's gonna Jamal Adams ripped into Joe Douglas, all that stuff, all Joe has to do when anyone questions what he's like, and again, the draft picks are gonna have to be to be determined. Like, you got to see how Becton and Mims and all these players that Joe Douglas drafted this year, you got to see how they turn out. You got to see how his free agent signings work. You have to see what he does with these draft picks that he acquired. But the Jets, and I wrote this line in the column that we literally just put up right now, searching for competence in their front office as long as I have been on the beat, literally. And from what I understand, again, like, I've made it very, I didn't grow up a Jets fan. I'm not a Jets fan now. So the years before, I can't tell you like the ins and the outs of this team before I got there. But from what I understand, they were searching for competence a hell of a lot longer than before I've been there. Probably since Bill Parcells was running the show, have they been looking for competence at the front office, like in the front office, right? Joe Douglas, what he's done, just look at his trades. Flipping Leonard Williams for a 3 and a 5, a defensive end that he had no intention of signing. We thought was going to get dealt for a 5th alone. He got a 3 and a 5 from him. Now trading Jamal Adams from this. I mean, the guy, he is more than competent. He's showing that he has the potential. If he can take this kind of free agent savviness, like he did with the signings of not overpaying for players, still fixing the roster, but also not doing it in a way that kills the Jets' long-term cap flexibility, making the trades like he did with Leonard Williams, Jamal Adams, making these draft picks. If the draft picks pan out, what you're seeing as a guy that doesn't have competence. You're talking about a guy that has the potential to be one of the best general managers in the NFL. And when the Jets went out there, and this is in there too, and this is kind of my last point on this, is that when the Jets made the decision to fire Mike Maccagnan when they did, they received warranted criticism. And I know, talking from people in the front office, they realized that a lot of that criticism was warranted. Christopher Johnson, the owner of the team, the guy who made the decision to fire Mike Maccagnan, realizes that criticism was warranted and admits that probably he should have fired Mike Maccagnan before he did. He should have fired him he should have fired him at the same time he fired Todd Bowles, and had the coach and the GM go at the same time. Christopher Johnson, the owner, realizes that. So the criticism that they received after firing Maccagnan, after they let him pick Adam Gase, after they let him spend so much money in free agency on massive contracts like he did for Le'Veon Bell and CJ Mosley, after he let him run his entire draft, and then to fire him, it was the wrong call. I mean, the phrase that I used back then was, and I know if people on Twitter have thrown this in my face 100 times, was organizational malpractice. In my opinion, that's what it was. He should not have, it was wrong. They did it the wrong way. They should not have fired Maccagnan when they did it. They should have fired Maccagnan. It was the right move to fire Maccagnan. There was evidence well before all of this that he should have been fired, but you can't let him do all of this and then fire him. The one caveat that I had to it all, though, was if they came away with Joe Douglas, it was worth it. Was that it all was worth it if you came away with Joe Douglas. And the reason that I said this, and I say this when we talk about players in college, I'm not a scout, man. The people that are paid to evaluate college players have no idea what the hell they're talking about. That's why, like, the batting average for finding good draft picks is like 300. Like, seriously, like no one knows what the hell they're talking about with evaluating players. So imagine what it's like when picking a front office executive, right? But with everyone that I talked to about Joe Douglas, every call that I made around the league, every agent I talked to, every front office person I talked to, all of this stuff, every single one of them told me that Joe Douglas is the can't miss executive prospect. He is the can't miss guy. He is the one that has the personality for it. He's the one that has the evaluation eye for it. He's the one that has the people skills for it. He's the one that has been trained under Ozzie Newsome, who's one of the best to do it, Howie Roseman, who's one of the best to do it, and all of these other people. I mean, Eric DeCosta right now with the Ravens is a hell of a general manager. He came up in the same system with Joe Douglas. So everyone I talked to was like, this is the right guy. So it almost became that it was the wrong decision, organizational malpractice to fire Maccagnan when they did. But if they somehow managed to come away with Joe Douglas and he's as good as everyone says, it's the right call. And when that deal got finalized, when Christopher Johnson spent all that time wooing him and the 6-year contract was finally what got Joe Douglas to Florham Park, when that happened, the text message I got from one of the most high-ranking sources that I have, and the text message I got was, I can't believe the Jets just got Joe. That was the text. I can't believe the Jets just got Joe Douglas. It was the Jets. The Jets with all this terrible reputation, the same old Jets, all that crap. They just got Joe Douglas as their general manager. This guy couldn't believe it. That's when it kind of became like, maybe it is worth it. And when you see what he's done since he's been general manager, Ryan Khalil signing notwithstanding, it's looking pretty good, man. That like I said, Jets want competence. They don't just have competence, man. They've got somebody that has the potential to be one of the better general managers, if not one of the best general managers in the game.
Have you seen, I'm bringing this up because there's a lot of chatter in the chat about this on Twitter and everything. Have you seen the Le'Veon Bell tweet yet, Connor?
Yeah, the Le'Veon tweet. Yeah, I saw it. Yeah. Well, did he send that one recently? I saw the one where
3 hours ago.
Yeah, I saw that one. Yeah.
Okay, let's end on this, just to get into it a little bit. And there's plenty more to unpack, and we're going to have another episode.
And Joe Douglas just released his statement too. Joe Douglas officially came out with a statement.
We're going to have more on Monday. We're going to record another episode getting you ready for training camp. But Le'Veon Bell says people do all the hooting and hollering to get you brought in just to leave. LOL, like people weird. Yo, the internet got these dudes doing whatever for attention. Even when they tell you bleep, they don't believe themselves. Where's Le'Veon going with that tweet?
Well, I mean, think about it. Like remember the whole Jamal dogs comment, like the infamous, I need more dogs. When the Jets were pursuing Le'Veon Bell, it was Jamal that was blowing up his phone. And it was Le'Veon, the culture's changed. It was Le'Veon, this is a new era. Le'Veon, be a part of the turnaround. Le'Veon, we're about to make the change. It was all this, come to the Jets. The Jets are new. The Jets are back. The Jets are back. And Le'Veon bought in. He's like, well,
Yeah.
I mean, the $52.5 million helped too. Like, obviously, the Jets offered him more money than anyone else was offering him. Like, the Ravens were kind of in, 49ers were in, not at the price tag the Jets gave him, obviously. So that was, he wasn't coming to the Jets for a bargain. Like, the Jets had to pay him, and eventually they did. But Jamal was like the guy that spearheaded the recruitment, like it was almost like a college recruitment. And a year after Le'Veon gets there, suddenly Jamal is asking for a trade because he doesn't want to be a turnaround. Look, I mean, there's all these quotes out there from Jamal. I don't run in the face of adversity. The Jets are back. The culture's changed. I want to be here. I'm the president, New York. Well, look, man, he took his ball and he went home. And I get it, right? I mean, I think the losing took its toll on him. The losing beat him up, but it's a bad look for Jamal. You wanted to be a part of the turnaround. You wanted to be the face of the team. You wanted to turn around the culture. Well, adversity comes and you're packing your ball and going home. I mean, it's not a great look. And if I'm Le'Veon Bell, I'm a little pissed off because Jamal's not the reason Le'Veon Bell signed here, but Jamal played a role in Le'Veon Bell signing here. And now for him to leave after the first year, it's not a great look.
All right, so we'll end things with Joe Douglas's thoughts. This just came across on Twitter. This trade provides us with a unique opportunity to improve our team with multiple first-round picks in each of the next 2 years and the flexibility to continue to build this team for the future. Adding Bradley McDougall's consistency and production to this year's team was an important piece that gives us more experience on defense. While we had maintained our interest in Jamal Adams having a long and successful career with the Jets, we know it's important to be prepared and willing to adjust to new offers and circumstances. As I have always said, my job is to listen to calls, and this offer was one we could not ignore. He's doubling down on picking up the phone, doubling down on answering the phone.
Yeah. It's a good thing he answered that phone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Imagine if that one went to voicemail. Woo. That's not one you want to leave unread.
So that's going to do it for this emergency edition of the Can't Wait podcast. As I said, though, we'll be back on Monday with a lot more. We'll talk more about Jamal Adams, but we'll also look ahead to training camp 2020, which is getting ready to go. We'll talk about what that means, how it's weirder than ever before, and what Connor's going to do without press box power rankings in 2020. All of that and more coming up on Monday. Thanks for joining us here on the Can't Wait podcast.